The debt ceiling continues to be one of the biggest stories in the news as more and more pundits begin to worry what will happen if the debt ceiling were to pass and we default on our debt. And the markets reflect that too, by the way, so we'll talk just a bit about that and where we go with that and what's happening there. In the meantime, in the midst of the debt ceiling fight, a city in California that you all know so well, namely San Francisco, makes an offer to give literal millions of dollars in reparations per person. So we'll talk just a bit about that and where the money is supposed to come from and why this is happening now and basically what this means. Greta Thunberg is arrested in a German mine protest but will be freed later, especially given the fact that she is smiling as she is carried away. And the DOJ has pointed out that they had the offer to have the FBI watch while the documents were reviewed, but they chose not to. It is going to be all this and more. I still got more votes than Kevin McCarthy. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. We'll get our Final Fantasy X on while we're sitting here waiting for everything to go in, and while I make the double check that we are live, in fact, everywhere right now. And we are live right now, so we're here. There's news. My name is Jay Edgar. This is Contemporary, and welcome to your evening news. We've got a lot to go over today. Definitely. Well, not as much. It's actually been kind of a slow news day. I struggled to put the show together today, I'm not going to lie. But in the midst of everything, we do have we've got the conversation about the debt ceiling still going on, but just the thing with San Francisco, like, where do you think that money is going to come from? Why do you think Dems are working so hard to make sure that the debt ceiling goes up? Because they know that states like California, in order to buy votes, are going to go back out and, well, borrow a bunch of money from the feds. So that'll come back out. You know that's going to happen too. It's either going to come for the taxpayers or it's just going to get printed back off. So we'll be talking about that as well. Crowder is trending. What did Steven Crowder do stupid this time? I don't even know. I'm going to look at that real quick while we're on air. Why is Crowder trending? Oh, the quartering is doing something with Crowder. Apparently he can't start a new company. I guess I'm going to look into that and see what's happening with that because, well, yeah, we're going to keep this trend on. But yeah, with that, we're going to get right into the news here. It's probably going to be something we're going to talk about tomorrow, and it'll be the culture war. That'll be the culture war segment. But let's get down into it before we get started. Make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and more as we come together to try to bring you a better news experience that is both by and for the common man. That is right. We're in a situation where most people get their news from people who wear a suit that costs more than their houses. And that's no way to get your news. These people have no idea how you live, what's important to you, and what is going to drive the decisions that you make, and what you need to know about our government and the decisions they are making against you. We do. Most of us have made the same kinds of decisions that you have. So go check out all that great programming. We'll be going and checking out the Porch Boys tonight after the show. So go check that out and find a news source that's by the common man for the common man. Let's get started. Let's start with finance for the day here. Starting with the Dow. We get the live chat up. Starting with the Dow, which is sitting at 33,910.85. That is down 391.76 points or 1.14%. Now, I've not pre-read on what it is that's driving the markets down. I do anticipate that there's not going to be a lot of talk about the debt ceiling right now, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I think a lot of the market sentiment that's going to start to fall again is going to surround the debt ceiling, because we saw this in 2011 with the default of the lowering of the credit rating just on the threat of a debt ceiling not being able to be passed and raised on a moment's notice or a whim. And it affected the markets. The markets dropped in 2011. They're going to, when we had the conversation last year, and they went back up 2 years ago now, and they went back up and jumped it up. The markets took a very, very big strain, wondering whether or not everything was going to drop. So we'll be seeing what's going on with that. I am curious to see what IBD and the CNBC both have to say about that, but we will watch this and see what happens with that. Looking at your Bitcoin, which is at 21,179 US dollars even. That is up 56 US dollars and 30 US cents, or 0.27% on trading for the day. And a choppy session that has seen highs and lows, but a lot of this staying within a close range, sinking off at the bottom to bring itself back down within $100 of its previous close. So if you got your Bitcoin, well, it's holding steady right now. Looking at the gas prices in the Madison area, which are still a very mixed bag. Some stations coming up to $3.15 and holding to $3.15. The Isthmus is staying the same. The enter of the Isthmus is at $3.15 as well. Not a lot of change. And the quick trip out on the west side being able to still hold itself up, or down rather, to the 294 mark. So, not a lot of change here today. I do hope to see some change and some drop come around here, but that's wishful thinking in this economy. We'll see what happens with that. Let's grab one from IBD for the morning, or the afternoon rather, the evening. This is your evening news, not your morning news anymore. Dow closes lower as financial stocks get hit. NASDAQ eats out slight gains as techs and Tesla shine, from Michael Molinsky. The stock market erased early gains to close mostly lower, although the NASDAQ did eke out a slight gain. Weak earnings from Goldman Sachs and Travelers dragged down financial stocks. Tesla led blue chip advancers as weekly China vehicle registration showed an initial sales boost for the global EV giant. The NASDAQ composite gained 0.1, while the S&P 500 closed 0.2 lower. The Dow was the worst of the major indices, dropping 1.1%. The small cap Russell fell 0.2. Volume fell on the NASDAQ but rose on the New York Stock Exchange, according to preliminary data. The Dow is holding above its 50-day and 21-day exponential moving averages. The S&P is holding above its 200-day moving averages, and the NASDAQ remains above its 50-day line. The S&P Tech Sectors ETF XLK led all 11 S&P sectors, closing up 0.5, while financials, industrials, materials, and communication services were the worst performing sectors. The ones that mostly deal with energy and especially moving things with diesel fuel, oddly enough. Although the financials not so much. While earnings season started just a few weeks ago, so far investors are treating earnings as a negative. But Jeffrey Buchbinder, chief equity strategist at LPL Financial, says that pessimism may be overdone. Lackluster global growth, ongoing profit margin pressures from inflation, and negative currency impacts are likely to translate into a year-over-year decline in the S&P index earnings for the quarter, said Buchbinder. As always, guidance matters as the market participants look forward. The key question coming into this earnings season is whether the pessimism surrounding 2023 has gone too far. The January Empire State Manufacturing Index came in at a dismal negative 32.9 estimates versus estimates for a negative 8.1 after December's negative 11.2 reading. The low number flashes a recessionary sign. The New York Fed surveys manufacturing executives about how busy they are, their views of the future, commodity prices, and their input on inflation. The Fed and the stock market watch the results for inflation signals. The yield on the benchmark 10-year Treasury note rose 2 basis points to 3.53. Odds for a 25 basis point hike on the February Fed meeting rose to 93.2. That would take the Fed funds rate to the 4.5 to 4.75% range, according to the CME Group Fed Watch tool. On the oil, crude oil prices rose 1.4% to $81 per barrel, the first time this year they've climbed above 80. The innovator IBD 50 ETF closed 0.2% lower. Defense contractor Heiko broke out of a flat base, gaining 0.1%, thank you Ukraine, and closing just below its buy point. The stock is trading well above its 50-day and 200-day moving averages, according to MarketSmith. So, a little bit more moving on this, but there are some things to watch and see. And of course, Investors.com says nothing about the impending debt ceiling fight, which I guarantee is driving at least a little bit of the market fear. So, we'll see what's happening with that and where that goes. Let's grab one from CNBC, and then we'll start talking about the debt ceiling. Dow closes almost 400 points lower and snaps a 4-day win streak, pressured by Goldman shares. From Tanaya Makil. The Dow fell on Tuesday as investors struggled to keep building on early 2023 momentum and weighed the latest earnings results. The blue chip index lost 391.76 points, or 1.14%, to close at 33,910.85. The S&P fell 0.2 to 39,9097, while the Nasdaq gained 0.14 to end the day at 11,095.11. Goldman Sachs slid 6.44% after the bank reported its worst earnings miss in a decade for the fourth quarter. Its results were pressured by declines in investment banking and asset management revenues. Meanwhile, rival Morgan Stanley posted better than expected numbers thanks in part to record wealth management revenue. Its shares jumped 5.91%. Those results came after other major banks such as JP and Citigroup reported mixed quarterly reports. Goldman and Morgan have almost mirror image price action today following their earnings. Young-Yu Ma, BMO Wealth Management Chief Investment Strategist, told CNBC even within the financial sector, individual lines of business are faring very differently, and Morgan Stanley's wealth management segment provided a strong ballast. These divergences are indicative of what we expect in this earnings season, diverging fortunes based on industry and sub-industry, he added. About 7% of the S&P 500 earnings reported earnings through Tuesday morning, according to FactSet, one of the companies. 70% have beaten expectations. United Airlines will report its quarterly result after the bell. Wall Street is coming off positive back-to-back weeks to start the new year, but investors may have entered a hall of mirrors, according to Mike Wilson, Chief U.S. Equity Strategist at Morgan Stanley. So, there we go. Another few things that are moving on the markets. Again, no mention of the thing that's on everybody's mind. Will they or won't they raise the debt ceiling? And that's what we're going to talk about. Starting with Politico. Perhaps the most dangerous part of this entire fight. Biden and House GOP refuse to budge as key debt ceiling deadline looms. From Olivia Beavers, Caitlin Emma, and Zachary Warmbrot. The Biden admin and the House Republicans are heading to an initial Thursday debt ceiling deadline without even a hint of endgame, ensuring a months-long standoff that's poised to rattle financial markets amid worries about a recession this year. The two sides are effectively shrugging as the Treasury Department warns the country will hit $31.4 trillion in borrowing cap on Thursday. So, let's talk about this for a second. We keep hearing from both sides, and I was critical of Trump on this one, that the debt is just going to grow, and we've got to just keep hammering at it. We can suspend the debt ceiling for a little bit at a time. We have to have a hard end to when that gets suspended. And we keep hearing that, we can't let it go anymore. We hear from both sides that we've got to stop it. We've got to rein this back in. And yet, it's only been 13 months since the last debt ceiling raise. And now we're there, and they need to go back and do it again. The department can still use extraordinary measures to pay the bills for another few months, but it means the potential economic doomsday clock is officially ticking, with House Republicans still insisting on massive spending cuts before they help raise the debt ceiling, and Democrats refusing to engage the idea. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said last week the U.S. likely won't run out of cash or exhaust those measures until at least early June. You just passed a $1.7 trillion spending package that is supposed to, by the way, carry you into, when did they say that was going to be? December? Until the end of the fiscal year? What happened to that? You said that was going to keep the government going until then. Why are we having this conversation about the debt ceiling is hit and we won't be able to pay our bills in July? Until then, the department is suspending investments in certain government retirement funds and hoping that the House GOP and Democrats can come to an agreement to keep the government from careening into an economic crisis with far-reaching consequences. Oh, the fear-mongering. Oh, it's so scary. Do what we want or there could be far-reaching consequences. What about the far-reaching consequences we already have? $31.4 trillion of debt. A debt-to-GDP ratio that is rapidly closing. What about that? But Yellen's warning to congressional leaders hasn't spurred any movement towards even the beginning of a deal between Congress and the White House. The biggest legislative battle of the year is just beginning and threatening to grow even messier than the 15-ballot speakership fight, and there's no exit strategy in sight. Even some Republicans viewed as more likely to negotiate with the White House are already taking aim at the admin's position, after House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said last week, "We will not be doing any negotiation." Maybe we should just not draw lines in the sand immediately, including the White House, said Rep. Kelly Armstrong, calling the admin's refusal to negotiate on fiscal reforms disappointing. Armstrong is a Republican representative from North Dakota. "If we default on our debt, there's going to be huge ramifications," he said. Is that a he or a she? I guess Kelly is one of those names that can go both ways. Now I'm curious. Let's find out. Yeah, that's a dude. That is a dude. I wonder if he goes by Kel. Like Keenan and Kel. "If we default on our debt, there's going to be huge ramifications," he said. "I'm not interested in bottoming out everybody's 401k. They've already had a tough year." The White House is already working behind the scenes to work around Speaker Kevin McCarthy, including dispatching its top advisors to meet with moderate Republicans, particularly those who won in districts President Biden won in 2020, in hopes Democrats can count on those GOP lawmakers to cross the aisle and lift the debt ceiling. And that's going to be the game. "I think there's a real chance of that," said one senior House Republican. "Kevin would probably love for that to happen because it gets him out of 'it wasn't me.'" Others think the White House needs to come at it differently for officials to have any hope of cross-aisle cooperation. Biden's initial comment of zero negotiations is a non-starter, said Rep. Don Bacon of Nebraska, who said he personally hasn't heard from the White House Republicans. Republicans can't get 100% of what we want with only control of half of Congress, but our voters sent us to DC to control spending, so the Democrats have to show some movement our way too. So if this will work, we'll listen to Token Diversity Hire tell us about no negotiation, and I do want to talk about the no negotiation side. Let's listen. And it's going to be a little bit of the same things that I said yesterday.
The debt limit Republicans want to cut spending as part of a debt limit deal. Is the president willing to cut any spending as part of a debt limit deal, and what would he be willing to cut?
Look, as you've heard us say before, we will not be doing any negotiation over the debt ceiling. But broadly speaking, at the start of this new Congress, we're reaching out to all the members through the Office of Leg Affairs, making sure that we have those connections with those new members, as I just stated. But I want to say, like in the past, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, there's been a bipartisan cooperation when it comes to lifting the debt ceiling, and that's how it should be. That's how it should continue. It's not and should not be a political football. This is not political gamemanship, and this should be done without conditions, and that's how we see this process moving forward.
When you say that there'll be no negotiating, you'll not negotiate anything involving spending?
What we're saying is that this should be done without conditions. In the past, we have seen this. We have seen both Republicans and Democrats come together to deal with this issue. It is one of the basic items that Congress has to deal with, and it should be done without conditions. So there's going to be no negotiation over it. This is something that must get done.
Do you have a position on how high the debt limit should be raised?
I don't have a position on that. What I can say more broadly, what I'm saying is that more broadly speaking, not going to get into the specifics of that. What I can say is that we believe when it comes to the debt limit, it has been done in a bipartisan way over the years and decades, and it should be done in a bipartisan way, and it should be done without conditions. That is important here.
So, and a part of the problem that we're dealing with is, yes, like Karine Jean-Pierre said.
On behalf of the Warriors, I want to thank President Biden.
Oh, shut up, you.
And Vice President.
Shut up. The problem that I have with the way that because the White House is trying to spin this to look as good for them as it possibly can, even though a lot of what we're seeing here right now is their fault, the White House's fault, the Democrats' fault. Let's listen to it from Karine Jean-Pierre's point of view. I don't think that there should be any political gamesmanship for this. This shouldn't be a political football. Now give us our way and our way only, and go back in and let us call you racist again. That's not how any of this works. And this is, the worst part about it is again, either the Republicans are going to cave, and a lot of it's going to be Republicans caving, like Politico mentioned, from people who are to the right but still manage to get elected in Biden-friendly districts. That's going to be a lot of the people who are involved in this, a lot of the people who do cross the aisle and say, no, let's not go back and default on our debt. Let's not have a conversation. Let's just go back up and raise it back up to the ceiling, to the moon. Those are people who are not going to be able to go home either, by the way, at the end of all this. But even the hardliners, the ones who don't want to move from the right, who want to have the spending cuts, are willing to come up and say, okay, this is my position, let's go talk about it. And the White House and the Schumers of the world are just, no, give us our way and our way only. To hell with the rest of you. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, if the House Republicans can actually manage to hold feet to the fire and do this, I will be impressed. And that is not something that I give to politicians, especially of the two big parties, easily. That is not a position that I give to them easily. And I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they have the balls, quite frankly. My prediction is that by Tuesday of next week, we're talking about how high the debt ceiling can go now and how long it's going to be before we hit it. But we'll continue to watch what happens with this and see where this goes. Let's grab one from NBC. Excuse me. House Republicans gear up for a debt ceiling fight with White House and Senate Democrats. from Sahil Kapoor. The Republican-controlled House has planted the seeds for a debt ceiling showdown, with Speaker McCarthy endorsing a push by his hardliners to demand spending cuts as part of any extension of the country's borrowing authority. The political divide is deep and the stakes are high. Ultra-conservative lawmakers insist they don't want the country to default, but their conditions for raising the debt limit are unlikely to be accepted by the Democratic-led Senate or President Biden. We can maybe watch a little bit of this and see what MSDNC's spin is. Let's look at what NBC's spin is first. Republicans are on a collision course with the White House, which is demanding that Congress raise the debt limit without conditions. If they fail to resolve their differences and cause a default, the range of consequences includes a stock market crash, a recession, higher interest rates for consumers, a weaker dollar, a U.S. credit downgrade, and a government unable to meet all of its obligations from funding the military to providing Social Security benefits. Full stop. And we know what the debt ceiling is. Like, this part of this we read already, but I want a full stop off of this. Now, let's look at some reality. Number one, there are, as I said yesterday, millions of programs that we can cut and trim before we go to Social Security, but this is NBC, so that's going to be the first thing they do is come back out and scream and yell about Social Security, because it's just those evil Republicans that want to cut Social Security. But why? And in what universe did Democrats become okay with expanding and continuing to fund the military? That used to be the first complaint they always had. Well, this is what's going on in our military budget because of evil Republicans. You have a perfect opportunity to slash that right now. And a reason to do so. And before we go in and see the MSDNC's shift on this, their spin on this, here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Go out and start grabbing things that are non-perishable. Also calorically dense. Beans, spam, tuna. If you have a canning pot, use it. I debated while we were watching the last video, and I might go back and get it. Going and grabbing mine and putting it on the dresser behind me. If you've got a pressure canner, even better, because then you can do fresh vegetables too. Grab some canned vegetables while you're out there. Stuff that'll keep giving you vitamins. Some soup. Because if nothing else, you can warm that up right in the can. Get a can opener, obviously. Don't forget the can opener. If you've got an ammo press, start loading some stuff back up. If you see ammunition at your local store, grab some of it. If you can learn a new skill right now that'll help you around the house, small appliance repair, plumbing, construction, possibly, learn it. These are all things that even if everything balances out, and even if the Republicans cuck on this on Tuesday, these are all things that'll help you for the time when we actually find Republicans with a spine. I know that's a really weird thing to talk about because that never happens, but at the time that we find Republicans with a spine that are willing to call the bluff and say, no, screw you. We're shutting it down. These are all things that'll help you even then. So it's never a bad time to start. Because if the stock market crashes, those shelves are going to be wiped out. They're going to be done. They're going to be gone because people are going to panic buy. And also go get your toilet paper too. Do that now. Don't wait until, let's see, they're saying that the cash runs out in June. Don't wait until May. Don't wait until April. Do it now. Let's see MSDNC's spin on this.
But here in Washington, there is a dire warning from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to congressional leaders that the United States is expected to hit its borrowing limit as early as Thursday, in 2 days. That would force the Treasury Department, she says, to take extraordinary measures to keep paying its bills and to prevent a default until early June. Yellen urging lawmakers to act quickly to raise the debt ceiling and, quote, protect the full faith and credit of the country. But it likely will not be that simple. Republicans, of course, now in control of the House and have threatened to use the debt ceiling as leverage to demand spending cuts from Democrats and from the Biden administration. Let's bring in NBC News senior political reporter Sahil Kapoor, who joins us just across the street on Capitol Hill. Sahil, it's good to see you this morning. How close do you think we're going to come here to just violating this thing that used to just be sort of pro forma, that they would raise the debt ceiling and move on, but now is being used as a bargaining chip? And what deals might Speaker McCarthy have made to become Speaker that could affect the process here?
Willie, that is one of the most important questions on Capitol Hill this year. Just how close to the brink will Congress come? Because House Republicans are on a collision course with President Biden on the issue of the debt ceiling. They insist they will not raise it cleanly when the deadline comes up in early June. They want conservative policy provisions attached to it. And this push is being led by many of the same 15 to 20 House Republicans who forced 14 embarrassing defeats for Speaker McCarthy before finally electing him to the job. You know they're willing to use aggressive tactics just based on how they've behaved so far. Look on the screen there. These are some of the things that they've told me that they want. Some of these members say that they want attached to any increase in the debt limit, dollar-for-dollar spending cuts, a 10-year balanced budget, cuts to the mandatory spending pile of the budget. That includes things like Social Security, Medicare, and food stamps, as well as government funding down to fiscal 2022 levels before the previous government funding deal. One of those Republicans, Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, told me, quote, "You only have so many leverage and negotiating points. The debt ceiling is one of those," unquote. Now, Speaker McCarthy himself has not issued a specific list of demands as to what he wants attached to the debt ceiling, but he has endorsed this tactic generally and said President Biden needs to come to the table, negotiate some changes to the federal budget. He compared the U.S. government to a child with a credit card limit that needs to be reduced, and he said he's not budging. Now, the White House says none of this is going to happen. Their position is no negotiations. They point out that this is not about policy. This is simply about whether the U.S. government pays its bills, and that to them is not something that they're going to negotiate on. Let's play what spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre had to say.
It has been done in a bipartisan way over the years and decades, and it should be done in a bipartisan way, and it should be done without conditions. We're not going to do any negotiations, and it should be again done without conditions.
Yeah, we listened to that nonsense already. And one thing to point out is it's been done in a bipartisan way in the past. No, it's been done in a uniparty way. Because these same people who go out and claim to hate each other, and yes, by the way, the MAGA Republicans do it too, but these people who go into the Congress and pretend to hate each other for the cameras and yell about and talk about investigating each other and then go back out to the bar and drink with each other and slap each other on the ass afterwards. It's just... I gotta say, the R-rated conservative and his wrestling theory about politics, when you look at stuff like this now and the people who they're coming out and yelling about versus who they were yelling about, you can see the fact. It's just like at WWE when you see a guy who yells and screams and tells you how terrible the other person is that he's fighting and then is giving him a hug while they're both naked in the locker room because they're actually all friends. And it is playing a part. Let's grab one from CBS. Here's what could happen in a credit debacle. From Amy Peachy. I'm going to see just if there's anything new off this, because we did talk about this yesterday. The federal government's cap on the amount that it can borrow to meet funding needs is approaching fast. Treasury Secretary Yellen told lawmakers last week the nation will reach the debt limit on January 19th, prompting a slew of warnings from Wall Street analysts and economists about the potential financial fallout if Congress fails to take action. The debt ceiling is currently at $31.4 trillion, representing borrowing the Treasury undertakes to fund financial obligations, ranging from safety net benefits such as Social Security payments to interest on the national debt. So let's move over on this and talk about this. What is the debt limit? The maximum amount the federal government is allowed to borrow to pay its debts. If the amount of government debt reaches the threshold and lawmakers fail to lift the borrowing limit, the U.S. would be unable to pay what it owes and could default. It's important to note that when Congress raises or suspends the debt ceiling, it isn't greenlighting new spending. Oh, yes, it is. Instead, it's giving the go-ahead for the Treasury to pay for spending that's already been approved. We're going to come back to that because I didn't realize this yesterday, and I read the same paragraph yesterday, by the way, or a similar one, because all these news sites work off of each other at this point. I didn't realize this. We're going to come back to this. Put a pin in this. We'll come back to this here. Has the debt limit ever been raised before? Yes, many times since 1960. Congress has acted 78 times to raise, temporarily extend, or revise the definition of debt limit. By the way, that averages out to more than once per year. 78 times. A person born in 1960 is only 63. 62, technically. 78 times in 62 years. I know that because my mom was born in 1960. 78 times in 62 years. Think about that. To raise, temporarily extend, or revise the definition of the debt limit. According to the Treasury, the debt limit was changed 49 times under Republican presidents and 29 times under Democratic admins. They had to go back and put that in there because evil Republicans are bad and they're the ones who are responsible for the national debt. The last time the debt ceiling was lifted was in December of 2021 when Democrats controlled both the House and Senate. And here comes the paid propaganda part of this. What happens if the debt ceiling isn't raised? With the U.S. approaching the debt ceiling on Thursday, Treasury can take several steps to ensure it keeps paying the nation's bills. These special accounting measures should provide the Treasury with around $400 billion in additional borrowing capacity under the debt ceiling, Daco of EY Parthenon said in his note. But without congressional action, the U.S. could face a default on its debt as soon as June, Yellen warned last week. What does Date X mean? Date X, or sometimes called the X date, is the day when the U.S. government would be unable to meet its financial obligations, a point which would likely deliver catastrophic consequences for financial markets and Americans throughout the country, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. At the moment, Yellen places Date X in June, but other estimates vary. The bottom line is that the U.S. could be months away from defaulting if the debt limit isn't raised. Debt limit's X date is a moving target, noted Height Securities' Benjamin Salisbury. In a research note, Yellen's prediction that a default could come as early as June is months ahead of previous projections, which put the date around sometime in August. What happens if the U.S. defaults on its debt? If the U.S. reaches a date when it's no longer able to pay interest on the trillions it already owes, which I'm sure is going to make them very, very, very reluctant and remorseful over the fact that they've been running Treasury yields at 4% for a year, and defaults, something that's never happened in the nation's history, the result could be catastrophic, according to some economists. By the way, that 4% is the interest on the debt. Because the U.S. debt is considered the bedrock of the global financial system, due in part to its stability, a default could shake the economies across the world. Americans could also face a recession, including higher unemployment, and the stock and bond markets would likely plunge. Well, yeah. Why would you ever buy a bond? And by the way, in spite of the fact that they were paying a 4% yield on 10 years last year, what did I tell you? I would not put anything anywhere near a bond. It's not official financial advice. But even at 4% 10-year yield, I wouldn't put a dime in a bond right now. Because number one, your inflation is going up higher than that 4%, first and foremost. And number two, and this is the big one, if they go back and default on the national debt, which I thought it was going to be a more certain thing than where we're at right now, if they go back and do the default on the debt ceiling, you're out all that cash. Well, at least the interest. Let's see. Recipients of federal benefits, such as Social Security recipients, might not get their monthly checks. Yeah, that's going to be the first threat that they go to. And that's probably going to be the first thing they cut, too, on the Democrat side, is the Social Security. Because that's going to be the evil Republicans are punishing you kind of thing. The evil Republicans hate you. They want to kick grandma off Social Security. Look, you're not getting your Social Security check. Again, in spite of not going to the 87,000 IRS agents, getting rid of them, cutting down the size and scope of the FBI, cutting the size and scope of the military, and the money that they put into defense contractors. 10 million things that you can do before you go after Social Security and Medicare. You disingenuous Fs. Still, exactly how a default would ripple through the economy is uncertain and contingent on a number of factors. The economic effects of running out of available resources to meet federal government obligations would certainly be negative, but we note that there's a high degree of uncertainty about the speed and magnitude of the impact the U.S. economy would incur, analyst of Bank of America Research said in a research note. Ultimately, it would depend on how the breach persists, how Treasury manages the situation, and how the financial markets react. What about mandated spending? That is where some experts disagree with Doomsday Scenario. Economist James K. Galbraith wrote in Project Syndicate that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and interest payments are mandated spending. In essence, that means the U.S. must by law pay for these benefits. That's correct. The U.S. Treasury must follow the law, debt ceiling or no. It cannot legally default in any obligation, Galbraith noted. He added the Treasury has no legal authority to single out Social Security or interest payments or anything else for cuts, and so far as I know, it couldn't stop those payments if it wanted to. Social Security's never failed to make a payment in its almost 100-year history, Galbraith noted. And the last one, and this, I think this is going to tie in, by the way, to what I want to go back and talk about, what we put the pin in. Can the U.S. avoid a default without raising the debt limit? Yes, but it is going to be messy. Treasury and lawmakers have some options that could help the U.S. meet its financial obligations and avoid a default, economists said. First, the Treasury has the authority to mint a platinum coin of any denomination. No, it doesn't. Yellen could, in theory, authorize $1 trillion platinum coin. Why do they always go this direction? Once again, you've got thousands of options before you go this direction. And deposited at the Fed, with the coin being used to meet its debt obligations. Notably, however, she's previously dismissed the idea as a gimmick. It's not actually a gimmick. Under ideal circumstances, it's not a bad idea. Like, if we were running 2% or slightly lower on inflation, we could actually probably get away with that. It wouldn't be the best idea in the world. But we could probably get away with that and not deal too much damage to the markets or the dollar if we did that while we were running a low amount of inflation. It would hurt, but it wouldn't be a doomsday kind of hurt. You're talking about minting $1 trillion platinum coin while we're already holding at 6.4%. Over 7.2% interest or inflation. That's a problem. Daco echoed Galbraith's contention, noting that the constitutionality of the debt limit could be challenged because the 14th Amendment states that the validity of the public debt of the U.S. authorized by law shall not be questioned. But Daco added, this has been rejected as an option by prior admins. There's the possibility of a procedure called a discharge motion in Congress to lift the debt limit, Daco added. This would circumvent the need for the approval of a committee chair as well as the Speaker to be introduced to the floor vote, thus allowing moderate House Republicans to join Democrats in raising the debt limit, he noted. This procedure would, however, take well over a month, and such wouldn't be a last-minute option. This is probably where they're going to go with, by the way. But I want to talk about this. Now we're going to, of course, they're not talking about any of this. I want to talk back up to here. The last time the debt ceiling was lifted in December of 2020, when Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate. And let's see, what was the other one? Okay. And what they said under what is the debt limit? Let's get rid of that because that's distracting. It's important to note that when Congress raises or suspends the debt ceiling, it isn't greenlighting new spending. Instead, it's giving the go-ahead for the Treasury to pay for spending that's already been approved. What do we know about the spending that's been approved so far? That the GOP, especially the upstart populist GOP, didn't have a say in it, and it was done that way by design. The $1.7 trillion spending package that Mitch McConnell put together just before Christmas. Back when my desk was over there, by the way. That scared me. I put my canning pot behind me, by the way. The $1.7 trillion spending package didn't get any input from the current Congress. In fact, it was almost seeming like it was put there to circumvent the current Congress, the new Congress that's coming in. Which is not a bad way to look at it, because it really was. They're putting it all the way back out until the end of the next fiscal year, which is the furthest they could do the spending package, with really no oversight whatsoever. Guess who gets a say in the spending now? Because this is greenlighting, giving the go-ahead for the Treasury to pay for the spending that's already been approved. Well, the people who have the purse strings and the people who have the control over whether or not we raise the debt ceiling didn't get a say in the spending that's already been approved. And it sounds to me like they don't approve of it. So it kind of sounds to me like we might be rethinking some of this. And it might be time to bring an idea down to the floor. So, that's where we're at. I'm glad that crossed my mind while I was reading that, because I would not have thought about that earlier. Otherwise, I just, authorize the Treasury to pay for spending that's already been approved. Wait, they approved $1.7 trillion. Oh, these guys got no say in that. Well, we'll see. I was always rooting for the Republicans to block the debt ceiling raise and cut the spending to do so, or to get a raise in the debt ceiling. Now I'm really a fan. All right, let's grab one from the New York Post. Before I do that, you see this headline here. We are just talking about the fact that the U.S. wants to raise its debt ceiling. And you know that California is going to be borrowing money to go keep up with this. San Francisco is going to borrow it from Sacramento, and then Sacramento is going to go borrow it from the U.S. But from the New York Post, San Francisco Reparations panel pitches $5 million each to black residents from Mark Moore. Never mind equal protection. A San Francisco panel studying reparations has proposed a one-time payment of $5 million to each black resident of the city deemed eligible as recompense for decades of harm they've experienced, according to a report on Monday. And a bunch of white fashion icons are about to get rich. A lump sum payment would compensate the affected population and will redress the economic and opportunity losses that black San Franciscans have endured collectively as the result of both intentional decisions and unintended harms perpetuated by city policy, the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee said in a draft report issued last month. Fox News Digital reported the proposal could cost the city, which has a 2022 to 2023 budget of $14 billion, roughly $50 billion. The Daily Mail reported. The committee also proposed wiping out all debts associated with educational, personal, credit card, and payday loans for black households. So run that back up to roughly $70 billion. Maybe more. The 15-member panel was established by San Francisco supervisors in May of 2021. A separate task force created by California's legislature is also studying reparations. The Citigroup's report says reparations must be adequate, effective, prompt, and should be proportional to the gravity of the violations and harm suffered. It added that members of the black community demand reparations, not to remedy enslavement, but to address the public policies explicitly created to subjugate black people in San Francisco by upholding and expanding the intent and legacy of chattel slavery. When? When did that happen? San Francisco has been one of the most progressive cities in the United States for as long as I've been alive, and probably longer. At what point in San Francisco history are they upholding the legacy of chattel slavery? The report notes that while neither California nor San Francisco formally adopted the institution of chattel slavery, other aspects of segregation like white supremacy and systemic repression found in the legal system, social codes, and extra-legal actions were designed to exclude blacks. To be initially eligible, applicants must be 18 and show they have identified as black or African American on public documents for at least 10 years. So they're trying to weed out the ones who just a couple years ago, when it became politically fashionable and socially fashionable to identify as black, even though that they weren't. They must also prove that they meet 2 out of 8 additional standards, including being born in or having migrated to San Francisco between 1940 and 1996, and having proof of residency for at least 13 years. Being personally or a direct descendant of someone who jailed in the failed war on drugs, or being a descendant of somebody enslaved before 1865. The committee will make its recommendations to the city in June, and Board of Supervisors President Aaron Peskin told the San Francisco Chronicle he hopes they will be approved. Well, again, where does the money come from? If this is what you need to do to make yourself feel better about some imaginary injustice that you, as the city government, have imposed on other people, that's between you and the people of your city. I'm not going to tell you how to run your city. I won't go there. I won't live there. And I will criticize it. But if that's what you need to do, that's between you and the tax-paying members of San Francisco. But again, remember, this is 3 times plus what your city's budget is. You can't afford this. And yes, that is going to be coming from the rest of us as well. Some more economic news for you. Judge temporarily blocks California fast food wages law. Coming to U.S. News and World Report by the Associated Press. A judge on Friday temporarily blocked the state of California from implementing a landmark new law aimed at raising wages and improving working conditions for fast food workers. Sacramento County Superior Court Judge Shelley-Ann Chang's order came in response to a lawsuit by restaurant industry groups that are seeking a referendum on the November 2024 ballot in a bid to overturn the law. The law establishes a 10-member council empowered to set minimum wages as well as standards for hours and working conditions for California's fast food workers. State and county election officials are still verifying whether the referendum proposal received enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. A determination expected by the end of January. If that happens, the law would be halted from taking effect until voters weigh in. In the meantime, the State Department of Industrial Relations said it plans to begin implementing the law on Sunday. That could include clearing the way for appointments to the Fast Food Council, but any wage increases or other changes couldn't take effect until at least October, meaning the law would have no immediate impact on worker pay. Now, the political cartoon, declining inflation, lower gas prices. Gas prices have gone up this year. Declining inflation? No. Flatlining inflation and improving Biden approval ratings until they found the documents. The International Franchise Association and the National Restaurant Association said state law requires the state to sit tight until the status of the referendum is determined. The industry group submitted more than 1 million signatures from voters in support of the referendum, well above the 620,000 required by state law. California bureaucrats, at the behest of special interests, are taking an unprecedented step to violate their constitution and the will of more than 1 million voters who asked for the Fast Food Council to be stopped via the referendum process. Matt Haller, Chief Executive Officer and President of the International Franchise Association, said in a statement, "The Service Employees International Union, which drove support for the creation of the council, blasted the lawsuit in several companies by name, including McDonald's, Chipotle, and Starbucks. This cowardly tactic comes right off the corporate playbook of Californians have, unfortunately, we come to know too well," said Tia Orr, Executive Director of the SEIU California, in a statement. When corporations fail to halt progressive legislation in the legislature, they pivot to bankrolling ballot measures in an attempt to circumvent democracy and the will of the people, she added. To bankroll a ballot measure in an attempt to circumvent democracy. So, to put the question to the people of California in an attempt to circumvent what the people of California have to say. What? Dude. What? And all in all, again, McDonald's, they talk about McDonald's and the billion-dollar industries. McDonald's can afford this. They can afford to crank up your wage $22 an hour or whatever arbitrary numbers out there. And what'll be nice about McDonald's being there, and Taco Bell and everybody else, is that mom and pop or startup fast food can't afford to step in and do the same. They can't afford to pay you $22 an hour to wait tables and bust your behind. So your job, either, if they do hire somebody, it's somebody who illegally jumped the border and can't demand minimum wage because they might get deported, even in California. Yes, even in California. Or it just gets eliminated and the business owner takes his business to Texas. And hopefully leaves his voting behind. Let's talk Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg! Climate activist Greta Thunberg detained by police in Germany at coal mine protest. With that big smile on her face. Let's watch the video first, as we'll see her being carried. I got another angle of this too, I think. Or maybe this is the same one. Let's grab this one first, then we'll look at the CNN video.
So the police starts to bring the first persons to the identity check.
So there's one big smile. Let's look at the other one.
All right, this is just into CNN. Police in Germany have detained climate activist Greta Thunberg. I want to show you the video of Thunberg being carried away there by policemen. There's 3 of them, I believe, carrying her away. CNN affiliate NTV is reporting that this happened at a protest over the expansion of a coal mine. Reuters is saying that Thunberg had actually joined other protesters at the mine on Friday.
Search crews in Nepal have recovered the remains.
And that's all that they have as well. And it's, again, more big smiles for that one, because she gets all the cameras on her when they go back and carry her off, which means she gets to come back out and protest again. Let's read from Rachel Ramirez, Laura Pattison, Inke Kapeler, and Lindsay Isaac. Blah, blah, blah. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has been detained by German police at a protest over the expansion of a coal mine in the West German village of Lützerath. This is the second time Thunberg has been detained at the site. Police spokesperson Christoph Huls told CNN on Tuesday she was part of a large group of protesters that broke through a police barrier and encroached on a coal pit, which authorities have not been able to secure entirely, Huls said. After the group advanced on the coal pit, police were concerned that masses of protesters could set the ground in motion after it had been softened by rainfall during the last few days. So they're talking mudslide. Officers intervened, removing people from the danger area and detaining them, one of whom was Thunberg, according to the police. We knew who she was, but she did not get VIP treatment, Hull said. She did not resist, he added. Thunberg had been the main speaker at the rally on Saturday. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. And had surprisingly returned to protest on Sunday when she was detained the first time, and then again on Tuesday, he said. Police said the group detained on Tuesday would be released later in the day, Reuters reported. Yeah, it doesn't sound like they're actually going out to arrest and throw them in the gulag for wrongthink, as much as Thunberg would like everybody to look at that big smile on her face too. Look at me! I am being carried away by the police. I'm being oppressed. Blah, blah, blah. How dare you? Thunberg joined thousands of other activists and protesters taking part in the weekend demonstrations against the razing of the German village that would make way for an expansion of the Garweiler lignite coal mine, which is owned by European energy giant RWE. Once the eviction is complete, RWE plans to build a 1.5-kilometer perimeter fence around the village, sealing off the village's buildings, streets, and sewers before they're demolished. The expansion of the coal mine is significant for climate activists. They argue that continuing to burn coal for energy will increase the planet-warming emissions and violate the Paris Climate Agreement's ambition to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Lignite is the most polluting type of coal, which itself is the most polluting fossil fuel. Thunberg tweeted on Friday that she was in Lützerath to protest the expansion and asked others to join on Saturday. Thunberg addressed the activist. The carbon is still on the ground. How dare you? And as long as the carbon is in the ground, the struggle is not over. How dare you? We need to stop the current destruction of our planet and sacrificing people to benefit the short-term economic growth and corporate greed. How dare you? She said. Clashes between activists and police have been ongoing this month, and photos from the protests have shown police wearing riot gear to remove the demonstrators. Some of the protesters have been in Lützerath for more than 2 years. CNN has previously reported occupying the homes abandoned by former residents after they were evicted to make way for the mine. More than 1,000 police officers have been involved in the eviction operation. Most of the village's buildings have now been cleared and replaced with excavating machines. So, and one of the things with this, it does sound a lot like they weren't necessarily going to remove them and again take them off to the gulag. It sounds more to me like they were looking for a way to keep them from falling into the pit. As the article said from the beginning, with the recent rainfall and the softening ground, and a big open hole strip mined into the earth. When somebody goes through that, when somebody comes out and that ground starts to move, you fall in the pit, you break your neck, and you die. For the cause, of course. Power fist. Solidarity. Other platitudes. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like they were having any intent to jail these people. It does seem like it was more for their protection, which, as against the police I am, I'm okay with that, but also on the fact that, like, if I went out to protest the government, but not at the government, because I keep advising you not to go bring your fight to the government, but if I went to protest the government, I would be so deep in the gulag that you would never see me again, especially the German government. So it is really a two-tier justice system. And the arrest probably was staged too. Let's talk about the documents. From the New York Post, the DOJ reportedly declined to have the FBI agents monitor Joe Biden document search. If you can find that, you know where to put it. The DOJ has decided against having FBI agents watch over a search for classified documents conducted by President Biden's lawyers at his Delaware homes, in part because his attorneys were deemed to be cooperating with the DOJ's investigation, according to a report. Well, let's see. Did they have security clearance? Are we going to spread them all out over the floor and take a picture of them? The Wall Street Journal reported Tuesday that the DOJ officials also opted for the hands-off approach in order to avoid complicating future phases of the investigation and not to interfere with Special Counsel Robert Hur's work. Is this a more recent investigation for the classified documents? Because didn't this happen long before we'd ever heard about Robert Hur? According to the Journal, Biden's attorneys were given permission by the Justice Department to search the 80-year-old president's Wilmington and Rehoboth Beach residencies for sensitive documents and notify the department if any were found, so that law enforcement personnel could take custody of them. The agreement between the DOJ and Biden's legal team took place after around 10 documents with classified markings, some dealing with Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdom, were found at the president's former office at the Penn Center think tank on November 2nd. It's interesting. It really is. And really more often on it, I think that it's Christopher Wray and the top brass at the FBI realizing that if they go after the president, they're all going to lose their jobs because, as an executive department branch, they serve at the pleasure of the president. Let's grab one from the Daily Wire. White House won't say if Fed's searching for more Biden classified documents or if Biden is involved in search. From Ryan Saavedra. White House press secretary, token diversity hire, refused to say during Tuesday's press briefing whether federal officials were still searching for additional classified documents from President Biden's time as vice president in the Obama admin. Hold on. I didn't pre-do this one. Oh yeah, we've got video. So let's not do the quotes. Let's just watch the video.
Regarding the discovery of classified and official documents at the president's residence and former office, last week you told, I believe it was Phil, that we all can assume, the American people could assume that the searches were complete and all the documents had been recovered. On Saturday, the White House counsel's office said that 5 additional classified documents had been found. Is it safe to assume now that all the documents have been recovered, all the official records, all the classified documents are back in the custody of the National Archives, or are more searches underway to find out if there's anything else there?
Look, I understand your question. We have addressed multiple questions from here. Multiple questions have been answered by the president. I know that you all just spent about, some of your colleagues, maybe you yourself, Zeke, was on the phone with my colleague for about 45 minutes that addressed a lot of your questions. I'm just going to continue to be prudent here. I'm going to let this ongoing review that is happening, this legal process that is happening, and let that process continue under the special counsel. I'm not going to comment from here. I'm not. One of the things that we have said for the last 2 years, when it comes to the Department of Justice, when it comes to legal matters, when it comes to legal issues, we have been very clear that we are not going to comment. We are not going to politically interfere, and that continues with this legal issue. And so I would refer you to the Department of Justice, refer you to the special counsel as it relates to specifics on this issue, and also my White House counsel colleagues are engaging with all of you, and will certainly continue to have conversations on this. I will say that we are consistent with what we have said on cooperating fully with the Department of Justice on this issue, and we will continue to cooperate fully with the special counsel.
Yeah, she's got nothing. During another portion, John Pierre was asked if Biden was physically involved in going through his things searching for classified documents.
Is he physically joining in the search of these things, rummaging around, these boxes in the garage and wherever else? I mean, literally.
Are you listening to the question that you're asking me?
Look, it's a serious matter. Where are these documents? It's a serious
okay,
matter. Is he taking part in searching for his own documents?
Look, I'm going to be very consistent here. I am going to be very clear here, as I have been for the past couple of days, almost a week now, dealing with this. We are going to, any specific questions that you have about this issue, I would refer you to my colleagues at the White House counsel's office.
Your job is to convey the message of the White House counsel to the reporters. That is literally your job, number one. Number two, that was an honest question. Are you listening to yourself? Yes, that's an honest question. There's no reason for you not to answer that question. None whatsoever. Peter Alexander repeatedly presses diversity hire about the White House claiming that Republicans are faking outrage over Biden's classified document scandal. Why shouldn't the Americans be upset about documents found in the garage, he asks. She can't answer.
Just to follow up, if I can, very quickly on this. The White House says Republicans are faking outrage on this issue. Why shouldn't Americans be outraged about classified documents being found in a garage?
Look, and I think I've been very clear about this. We have answered questions on this at this podium. You've heard, as Phil was saying, twice from the president talk about this. He said that he didn't know, right? He said that he was surprised, and he said that he takes classified information and documents very, very seriously. We heard directly from the president on this issue. Now, anything else, anything beyond that, we're just not going to talk about. There's an investigation going on. There's a legal process here, as we've been very, very clear about. I will let the White House counsel talk about any specific details about that, but we're going to be prudent here and make sure that we are not interfering in this process.
I guess that's why I'm asking, though, because you've said that you don't want to interfere here and be prudent about the process, but the White House did post a statement saying that Republicans are faking outrage. So to that point, why shouldn't Americans be upset about documents found in a garage?
That's for the American people to decide, right? That is for you all, or I'm sure going to talk to many folks out there and have this conversation. But what we do know, right, what we do know from polling that we have seen over and over again, from your coverage, from what we hear, what the president goes out and talks to the American people, they also care about the economy. Right? They also care about what is the president doing to lower costs, which is why he took historic action in making sure that gas prices went down at the gas pump. And we saw that happen by more than $1.70. And that's the work that the president's going to focus on. You think about the Inflation Reduction Act. That's going to lower prescription drug costs lower medical costs, right? When you think about that, lower energy costs. So that's going to be our focus here. We know that's what the American people truly care about as well, and it is very important for them that we do that work. I'm going to try and go to the back. Go ahead.
Yeah, that is just a complete non-answer. And lastly, Wei Zhejiang grills token diversity hire over Biden's document scandal. An angry, dismissive, and snappy token diversity hire refuses to give meaningful answers, which is exactly the same as the last 3 clips that we looked at.
I want to follow up on Cecilia's question, and sorry if I missed it, but on Friday, did you or did you not know about the additional 5
I literally just answered that question.
But I missed it, so is it yes or no?
Well, I mean, you're not too far sitting next to her, so I was very clear. I provided the information that you all had at the time, and I confirmed. No, I did not know. I'm saying I had the information. I actually said this to Cecilia. I had the information that you all had at the time, right? And so this is why I also said to Cecilia, this is why we are trying to be very prudent here, and we're trying to be very consistent and say this is an ongoing legal process. And this is why I say we're just not going to comment from here. That is a perfect example in Cecilia's question, and I was very clear about that.
When did you learn about the documents found at the Penn Center in November and in Wilmington in December?
When your team was doing a story on it.
Got it.
Because I was also asked a similar question about if our team has been engaged on this, and I've been very clear. This is something that the White House counsel is handling. This is something that is being handled by the president's lawyers, and been very clear. This is why we are being prudent here. This is why we're being consistent with what we have done the last 2 years when it comes to DOJ, Department of Justice investigation. We are just not going to interfere.
Well, on that note, you've repeatedly emphasized the need, just as you did today, for independence, for integrity of the Department of Justice investigation. One reason why you continue to point us to the DOJ. So I wonder why then did the White House counsel go to Wilmington to facilitate the handing over of documents to the DOJ? How is that separate? How is that separating the White House from the DOJ?
And Weijia, I appreciate the questions. I know there's going to continue to be dozens more questions probably today, and I will say, reach out to the White House counsel's office. That's one of the reasons my colleague was on.
That's your job, is to be the mouthpiece for the White House counsel's office. The National Archives have dismissed the claims of mishandled Obama-Biden documents weeks before its first batch was found. So the headline was a little bit confusing for me. I didn't pre-read this article because I had archived it when we were getting started. So I wanted to talk just a bit about that. And by the way, allegedly in this ad, which we can't play the video because this is archived, you can see the documents in this ad. The National Archives dismissed reports about mishandled documents from the Obama-Biden admin as false and misleading, just weeks before the first batch of classified documents were uncovered at the Penn Biden Center last fall. The National Archives responded to questions about the documents on October 11th, less than a month before the classified documents would be found at the Biden think tank in Washington. It argued that all documents from Obama admin had been securely moved to locations that met strict archival and security standards. Reports that indicate or imply that the presidential records were in possession of the former president or their representatives after they left office, or that the records were housed in substandard conditions are false and misleading. The National Archives and Records Administration wrote. NARA did not respond to a request for comment over whether Biden's garage in Wilmington, Delaware met strict archival security standards. Well, that's because it didn't. Like, that's a car barrier. In the dead of the night, unless you've got other guards in there, that doesn't that doesn't stop anybody from getting in there. But of course they were coming up to run interference on this already. I've got this feeling they knew that they were boned if this actually happened in October, long before they ever found the documents, and that's possibly why they went out and started looking for them. It's because somebody knew that they weren't there. I don't know who. I don't know why. From the Blaze. It's an embarrassment. Democrats express shame over Biden's apparent mishandling of secret documents. From Joe McKinnon. The recent revelations about President Biden's improper retention of top secret documents have prompted some Democrats to embrace absurd conspiracy theories about who's really to blame. Others have downplayed the severity of the scandal. A handful of Democrats have now admitted that the recent turn of events painting the Democrat president as a hypocrite are embarrassing. Debbie Stabenow told Meet the Depressed that it's certainly embarrassing that Biden should be caught having done precisely what he's castigated former President Trump for allegedly doing. Oh, looks like we've got Schiff too. Shifty Schiff. Ronnie Jackson. But we'll look through some of this here. I wanted to see if there was a short video of the Stabenow interview, because if we go to the NBC one, we're going to have to watch the whole 10-minute interview. Let's see. From my perspective, it's one of those moments that obviously they wish hadn't happened, said Stabenow. John Garamendi of California concurred that the debacle ought to be a source of shame, telling Fox News Sunday that it's an embarrassment, no doubt about it. In fact, I don't need to imagine. I know exactly what President Biden said when he was informed that the documents were found in his office in Washington, and that was "oh" followed by a 4-letter expletive, added Garamendi. Adam Schiff told ABC's This Week that Congress cannot exclude the possibility that Biden, through his mishandling of classified documents, more of which turned up over the weekend in the president's Delaware home, compromised national security. Let's listen.
Response from Congressman Adam Schiff, the outgoing chair of the House Intelligence Committee. On this show just after Attorney General Garland appointed a special counsel in the case of the Trump documents. You said it was the right move. Do you feel the same way about this special counsel?
I do think it's the right move. The Attorney General has to make sure that not only is justice evenly applied, but the appearances of justice are also satisfactory to the public. And here, I don't think he had any choice but to appoint a special counsel. And I think that special counsel will do the proper assessment. I still would like to see Congress do its own assessment of and receive an assessment from the intelligence community of whether there was an exposure to others of these documents, whether there was harm to national security in the case of either set of documents with either president. But yes, I think the special counsel was appropriately appointed. Jonathan, if I could also, though, because my state is still trying to dig out from these terrible storms, I want to thank the president for making an emergency declaration and let Californians know that in the 3 most affected counties, they can now apply for help in terms of rebuilding.
So that sounds an awful lot like thrown under the bus. Let's see. Schiff previously suggested that Trump's storage of sensitive documents in a guarded, locked environment, not a garage, was an indication that the former president was a public menace with a cavalier attitude towards hard-won critical information. Schiff also penned a letter to the Director of National Intelligence saying those entrusted with access to classified information have a duty and an obligation to protect it. Raphael Warnock underscored the gravity of the situation. Classified documents are to be taken seriously, and they are to be handled with a great deal of care, and no one is above the law, Warnock told This Week, adding, "So I'm glad to see the Justice Department doing its work, and we ought to let that work proceed. Nobody's above the law, And we need to get to the bottom of this so that we don't see this kind of thing happen again. One Clinton campaign veteran told The Hill, everyone can say what they want, but this weakens him, full stop. This is just one of those things that will stick around and won't go away. David Axelrod told Reuters that the Biden scandal was an embarrassment, basically a huge gift to Trump. Ronnie Jackson suggested last week the timely discovery and an announcement of these documents and the resultant efforts by Democrats to distance themselves from the president may altogether be a way to get rid of Joe Biden. And of course, Ron Filipkowski. I haven't seen him on Twitter for a while. I wonder if he blocked me. That'd be a gift if he did. Complaining about Ronnie Jackson. Saying it's a conspiracy to get rid of Biden. But I'm betting it is. And I would not be surprised. Now, in this particular political cycle, nothing really surprises me. And I could see Biden either staying as president all through and just ignoring all the controversy that goes around this, because we do kind of have a 24-hour news cycle, or he resigns and he says, hey man, I did the right thing. Will my opponent do that? Hey, I stepped down, man, come on. That orange guy over there, will he get out of the race, man? Because that's the right thing to do. Come on. But let's listen to Ronnie Jackson.
And that could be happening here, Jen, is that I've been saying for a long time that the Democrats are going to have to figure out a way to... And they don't want this man to run for president again. He's a recipe for disaster in the next presidential election. So I think, a lot of people thought it would be his cognitive issue. I thought so as well. But I thought, well, maybe they won't go down there because that's admitting defeat, that they put this cognitively incompetent man in a position like the president of the United States. I said all along, I thought maybe they would let the Hunter Biden thing blow up a little bit. But maybe this is what they're doing. Maybe this is the first shot that they're going to fire to try to get him in a position where he ultimately has to resign, or at least has to decide that he's not going to run again. Something's going on here. A lot of stuff's been exposed, like you said.
Well, we'll see. We'll watch what happens from it. All right, we've got a couple more things to catch up with before we head out of here for the day. So let's finish up what we have. Reading from CNN, GOP Rep. Jim Banks announces Indiana U.S. Senate campaign. From David Wright and Shauna Mizell. Jim Banks announced on Tuesday that he's running for the U.S. Senate, seeking the seat left open by outgoing Republican Senator Mike Braun, who's running for governor. We need conservatives in Washington who aren't afraid to fight Biden's radical agenda. That's why I'm running to represent our great state of Indiana in the U.S. Senate, Banks wrote in a tweet on Tuesday morning. Banks, a Navy vet and a conservative who just won his fourth term in the House, is ready to enter what could be a crowded and competitive GOP primary for the open Senate seat in a reliably red state. The Club for Growth has already started, attacking one of his potential rivals, former Governor Mitch Daniels, launching a 60-second digital attack ad last week. Yeah, that's going to be one of them to watch, because it's not going to be a matter of where the race goes. And I don't think like your Ron Filipkowskis and your Jersey My Wife's Son Reliance are going to be focusing on the general for this one so much as which boring neoconservative, war pig, warmonger person who will vote in favor of raising the debt ceiling they can try to astroturf into this seat. Other prominent candidates who have expressed interest include Eric Holcomb, the current governor, and 5th District Rep. Vicky Spartz. Banks was first elected into the House in 2016 to represent the Indiana 3. In the House, he was a member of the Armed Services Committee and the Committee on Education and the Workforce. Banks was also one of then House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's Republican nominees to serve on the January 6th House Select Committee, but he was ultimately rejected by then Speaker Pelosi due to Banks' decision to object to the certification of the 2020 presidential election results. And also, he wasn't a controllable, reliable Cheney/Kinzinger type. So this one's going to be kind of messy and kind of fun to watch. We'll see what happens with that. The New York mayor got in the news this week from Reuters. New York mayor says no room in his city for migrants. From Tim Reed. Well, I think it might be time to rethink that sanctuary city status then. Because that's the reason they're landing there. The mayor of New York traveled to the Mexican border city of El Paso on Sunday and declared that there's no room in New York for busloads of migrants being sent to America's most populous city. Eric Adams, a Democrat, was also critical of the admin of Democratic U.S. President Joe Biden, saying, "Now is the time for the national government to do its job about the immigrant crisis at America's southern border." The visit of a New York mayor to a southern border city about the issue of immigrants is unprecedented. Well, that's because they can come back out and support politicians who open the border up and allow migrants to come into the cities, like El Paso, and Donna, and Yuma, and places like that. But then they never have to deal with the consequences up until now. That is quite the message coming from a Democrat as well, who named himself as a sanctuary city. Named his, I guess he didn't name his city as a sanctuary city, but he kept up the facade of it, so good job. Good job. Let's grab one from the USA Today. This one rubs me the wrong way. I've already got things I hate. This, if I didn't already have things I hate, this would actually be in the other window, awaiting things that I hate. And I have my tweet that went with this as well. So I've got two articles on this. We might not read the second one, but we will read the first one. Wyoming lawmakers push for electric car ban to limit sales by 2035. From Natalie Nesa Alund. A group of Republican Wyoming lawmakers want to phase out the sale of electric vehicles in the cowboy state by 2035, saying the move will help safeguard oil and gas industries. The bill introduced into the state legislature on Friday claims electric vehicles will hinder Wyoming's ability to trade with other states. Boy, that's about the stupidest reason to ban other people from driving what they want to drive. And another indication that the government has way too much goddamn power. Wyoming's vast stretches of highway, coupled with a lack of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, make the widespread use of electric vehicles impractical for the state. The bill, sponsored by Senator Jim Anderson and co-sponsored by 5 other GOP legislators, reads, among the reasons cited in the legislation, batteries used in EVs could contain critical minerals whose domestic supply is limited and at risk for disruption. Minerals used in electric batteries are not easily recyclable or disposable, meaning that municipal landfills in the state could be required to develop practices to dispose of these minerals in a safe and responsible manner. Sounds like a you problem. The bill also notes the oil industry has employed thousands of people in the state. The proliferation of electric vehicles at the expense of gas-powered vehicles will have deleterious impacts on Wyoming's communities and will be detrimental to Wyoming's economy and the ability for the country to efficiently engage in commerce. Really? Because every single vehicle that mines rare earth minerals, and even the common stuff that builds the EVs, runs on diesel fuel. The bill would phase out electric vehicle sales in Wyoming. The bill's language was clear, but Anderson told the Washington Post on Monday that he does not actually want electric vehicle sales phased out. I don't have a problem with EVs at all, Anderson told the Washington Post. Anyone who wants to buy an EV should have the freedom to, he said, adding that his friends and family members have them. His office could not immediately be released by comment by USA Today. That's their typo, not mine. More states requiring electric or hydrogen-powered vehicles by 2035. Meanwhile, in a dozen other states, with vehicle emission standards tied to rules established in California, leaders are facing weighty decisions on whether to follow the Golden State's strictest in the nation new rule that require all new vehicles to be electric or hydrogen by 2035. Under the Clean Air Act, states must abide by the federal government standard vehicle emission standards unless they at least partially opt to follow California's stricter requirements. Washington, Mass, New York, Oregon, and Vermont are expected to adopt California's ban on new gasoline-fueled vehicles. Colorado and Pennsylvania are among states where lawmakers have signaled they will likely not follow California's lead. The legal ground is a bit murkier in Minnesota, where the state's Clean Cars rule has been a political minefield and the subject of a legal fight. Luke, you probably can let us in on a little bit of that. Republicans in Virginia have rejected rules adopted when Democrats controlled the state that would have moved Virginia on a path towards adopting the California model. Good. So, he says he has no problem with them, and yet he's looking at a bill that could ban them. Let's grab a little bit from the Hill, and then I will weigh in on this and how I feel about this. From the Hill, Wyoming lawmakers propose ban on EV sales. From Lauren Sforza. A group of GOP Wyoming state lawmakers want to end EV sales there by 2035, saying the move will help safeguard oil and gas. The bill was sponsored by 6 state legislators who said the EVs will hinder Wyoming's ability to trade with other states. The bill states citizens and the industries would be encouraged not to purchase the EVs before the ban goes into effect. So this is pretty much the same information. Now, I found out about this. That moron, by the way. That moron who ended his own political career. Trump didn't end that. That moron did, but we're not talking about Scott Walker. We're talking about EVs. Ian Yeager on Twitter today posted this question. Wyoming to ban the sale of new electric vehicles by 2035 to ensure the stability of the gas and oil industry. Well, there were actually other reasons behind that, and honestly, I think those were all stupid too. But his question is, do you support this? My answer, and I quote tweeted, and also replied. I copy pasted and did it both the same way. J. Edgar, who got more votes than McCarthy, responds, I don't support it in either direction. Why the hell would I support this? If you want an EV, buy an EV. If you want a gas car, buy a gas car. I want a gas pickup. Well, I want a diesel pickup, but I'm not in a position to get one right now. I want a gas pickup truck. So you know what I bought? In 2017? A gas pickup truck. And also in 2020. Stop worrying about what other people drive. And again, this is the indication in both directions with California banning gas cars in California. Market it. Let the free market come in. Let the people in the EV market, like the manufacturers, pitch their pitch, shoot their shot. Let them all figure that out, and if the people want an EV, they'll buy it. And if they don't, they'll watch The Price is Right. It's plain and simple. The fact that we're even having this conversation means that there may or may not even be a market for that. Now, yes, I understand that this is going to require people to go back out and put EV charging stations, but here's the thing, if the gas station or the grocery store, or whatever it is in Cheyenne or wherever the hell else it is, puts out the signage that says, "We charge your EV here," people are going to go there and they're going to spend money at the grocery store. They're going to stop and charge up their car at the gas station and take a leak and go buy a bunch of stuff. And honestly, if there doesn't appear to be charging infrastructure, the people in the Tesla, well, probably not the people in the Tesla because that's been associated with the far right at this point, but the people in the Leaf EV or the Mustang Mach-E, they'll stop there and they'll buy more stuff. The free market will take care of this. If there's a market to have EVs, then the market, the infrastructure to build to fuel them will exist. But, and again, stop concerning yourself over what other people drive.
I need some music.
I don't understand. And this again is coming from somebody who would not own an electric vehicle. Maybe sometime in the far future, after they've been tried and tested and true for decades. Maybe. I was slow to embrace multi-port fuel injection, you guys. But it's really not your concern what other people drive. Alright, and the last one, which was our leftover story from yesterday, before we do Twitter trending and head out of here for the Porch Boys. From CNN, Supreme Court to hear challenge from ex-Postal Service worker who refused to work on Sundays. From Devon Cole and Ariane DeVogue. The Supreme Court agreed Friday to take up the case of a former U.S. postal worker who wants the justices to revisit a decades-old test for determining whether employers can deny religious accommodation requests. Conservatives have long sought to throw out the standard set in 1977, arguing it sets too low a bar for employers to meet when denying requests by religious adherents. Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch have recently said the court should revisit the 1977 decision. In the 77 case, Trans World Airlines Incorporated versus Hardison, the court determined that employers could deny a reasonable accommodation request made by an employee under the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and based on their sincerely held religious beliefs if the accommodation results in an undue hardship on the employer. In the case at hand, Gerald Groff, a Christian who observes Sunday Sabbath, started working for a rural U.S. post office in Pennsylvania in 2012. In 2015, when the agency began delivering Amazon packages on Sunday, he was given an exemption to have that day off, but was later told he would need to work on Sundays. That's the union talking, by the way. That's not necessarily the post office. He transferred to a different post office that had not yet started delivering Amazon packages on Sunday, but when it did, he informed the bosses he could not work that day, and they began to attempt to cover his Sunday shifts by scheduling other workers for them, which should not have been that hard because remember, this is a government union job, which means you get double time on Sundays. Just remember that. This ad hoc approach failed to consistently accommodate Groff throughout the 2 years of peak and non-peak seasons, his attorneys wrote in court papers, adding that his accommodations required other workers to work more shifts or deliver packages on Sunday. Over time, Groff received all discipline, short of termination, for declining to work on Sundays, for which USPS could not find a replacement. His attorney said, facing termination, Groff resigned and sued the USPS for failing to reasonably accommodate his religious practice. Lower courts sided with the Postal Service, ruling the accommodating Groff's request would result in an undue hardship under the standards set in the Hardison case. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar urged the justices in court papers to not take up the case, citing the lower court's decision, arguing that Groff's case is a bad vehicle for revisiting the Hardison case, since meeting his request would qualify as an undue hardship on the USPS. Not really. Once again, the big one for me, the important one for me, is to remind you that every employee, like if this was your Burger King, where for the most of it, you get your time, and your managers go out of their way not to schedule overtime. That would be a different scenario, because if somebody's got plans on Sunday or something's going on Sunday, then they might not want to jump back up for whatever their minimum wage is. I know this from having a postal worker in the family and living in my aunt and uncle's house for numerous years on and off. And he worked at the annex, the mail sorting facility. So there was work on Sundays for that. At the time there wasn't mail carrier work for that, but he wasn't a mail carrier. He was a letter sorter. And yes, if you in the U.S. Postal Service went to work on a Sunday, you got double time. Automatic. Even if you had taken vacation or been off for the week on an unpaid, and that was the only day of the week that you worked, you got double time on Sunday, no matter what, in the post office. This is not an undue hardship on the USPS to find people who want to go get double time. And you knew about this coming in advance. Okay, I'm gonna put this in another situation for you. When I was in Mass, even though I was very, very broke, very, 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 very broke while I was out there. And this wasn't even for a religious standpoint. This was just so I could actually have a chance to recharge. But the manager, the scheduling manager at the grocery store that I worked at, did put it in as a religious exemption that I never got scheduled on a Sunday, because I was going to school, I was working my job in the small independent mechanic shop, and then I was working at the grocery store on top of it. And I was, for the most part, doing 14 to 16 hours a day most times. But with that being said, with that happening, I had asked, I said, can I just not work on Sundays, please? I want to go to church, which I did start going to church at the time, and it was a religious exemption, but also I needed to have a day where I wasn't going to work every day. And even still, you guys know here, I don't turn my webcam on Sundays. It just doesn't happen. It is not hard to work around somebody's religious schedule. It's not that difficult. So they'll hear this. I'd be interested to see which direction this goes, because this could come out to a point where, yes, you could have complete religious exemption from working on Sunday if you choose not to. And honestly, one of the things that kind of encouraged me about this is that this could go on to change the way that we do business in this country, because typically on religion, especially if there's a religious exemption, there are no questions asked. You're not allowed to ask, okay, I need to see proof that you were there on Sunday in order for you to get the religious exemption. So that's what we have for that. But that's our last story for the day. The last thing that we do on Tuesday is we look at the Twitter trending. So let's get the Explore page up. I already said Crowder was trending. I don't know if he still is or not. But let's take this over here and let's see what's going on, what it is that Twitter thinks that we should be talking about. So our trending today, we will read the top 5 stories. We don't do much because the Tuesday vibes, the Tuesday motivations are usually done by this point. One of the nice parts about this time slot. But we will see what our top 5 top trends are. Number 1 is Jay Briscoe. Sadly, Jamin Poog has passed away, known to fans as Jay Briscoe. He was a star in Ring of Honor for 20 years. From the first show until today, Jay and his brother Mark dominated Ring of Honor, reigning as champions to this day. We'll do whatever we can to support his family. Rest in peace, Jamin. So it looks like Jay Briscoe passed away. I tangentially know that name because I was a big wrestling fan when I was younger, but I was WWE and WCW. So I don't know much about Ring of Honor, but I do hope that he finds peace in his next life, and I hope his family are able to grieve and move on as they go. Trending number 2, Teen Mom Family Reunion. Oh, this ought to be intelligent. Let's see. No comment. I see no wrong in Ashley and T actions. I'm not even tweeting about it because, well, you are tweeting about it because it's clear who kept this crap going after producers said leave it alone. They wanted smoke and they got it. Okay, I don't spit on people, but I don't know. I'm giving Ashley a pass for that one. I don't care who says what. Where was all this bully talk when Brianna sent Kale a treadmill? When Brianna said she would spit on Kale? When she was being sneaky with Kale? Baby dads? How about when Brianna's sister snuck Kale from behind? They pick and choose like a MF on this show. Dude, I don't know what's going on, but this sounds a lot like a lot of reality TV and people who got famous for making stupid decisions in their lives. Let's see, number 3 is Night Court. I asked my mom because I saw a commercial for Night Court. The girl from Big Bang is in it. I don't know what's going on with that. I didn't like that scene, but you don't know how happy I am to see John Larroquette on NBC again, Night Court. So I know the first season of the self-titled sitcom is still, in my opinion, some of the best 90s TV ever made. I definitely see why people are saying the new Night Court is taking its time to get its sea legs under it. I would rather see a show take its time to set up a premise rather than just be good from the jump and proceed to go 88 miles an hour straight off the cliff, which is what most TV does these days. I guess Night Court was actually insanely successful. I never saw the original one. Apparently it has a laugh track. I don't know. I don't have NBC. I don't have cable, so I'm obviously not going to be watching this. And I don't have Peacock either. That's one of the few streaming services we don't have here. So I don't know what's happening here. Looks like Brent Spiner was in it too. Commander Data. Was he in the original one? I don't remember. But I guess we'll see if it's good. I appreciate them keeping the jingle of the original Night Court. Let me see if this brings back any memories.
Not news stories. Welcome to Night Court.
I remember that song. I didn't remember it from Night Court. You know what I remember it from? The Bill Clinton episode of Family Guy. When he played the saxophone with the two Secret Service guys playing bass. I remember that. And then I found out years later that was Night Court. And yeah, as soon as I heard the music, I remember that. So, interesting. Interested. but not interested enough to go out of my way or buy like Peacock or something to watch it. I have enough streaming services. All right. Number 4 is Dem Boys. Another one going and talking about Ring of Honor Wrestling. Jay Briscoe helps his daughter practice her cheer routine from home during quarantine. So this is, probably talking a little bit more about what the Dem Boys were doing out of Ring of Honor, because that apparently was the faction Jay Briscoe was in. So again, we go back and I say again, I do hope he and his family find peace in their beliefs, and they can grieve appropriately and move on appropriately. And number 5 is Geraldo. Geraldo Rivera on the 5, mocking Benghazi as if it was just Republicans trying to hurt Hillary and Obama. Rivera should be fired for his hurtful comments. Benghazi should never be forgotten, and the truth still needs to be told. Hillary went to bed while Americans under her care died. And we can listen to this. Oh, this is the AR side of this. But we can also listen to him gaff on that, I guess.
Reason to have an AR. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, there is no legitimate reason other than maybe sport shooting if you're a registered person in one of those high-end sport clubs. There's no legitimate reason to have an AR-15. You can't shoot deer with it. You can't. It has no practical significance. What it does is it machofies, if that's a word. It makes macho the people who possess it. Oh, look at me! I'm a big deal.
It's a rifle.
And it's not a rifle.
Yes, it's
Greg.
a rifle.
It is a machine.
What does AR stand for?
It is an automatic rifle.
What?
No, that's not what it is.
Well, all I know is that AR-15s have no place in American society other than sport clubs.
Okay.
And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, that's a moron. And it's always, it's about hunting deer. Jordy says, does Geraldo not know that millions of people use AR-15s for deer hunting? Well, good luck, because that's an awfully small bullet. I mean, if you're chambered in the standard 5.56, yes, you can chamber them in 7.62, which is a little bit more appropriate for deer hunting, but if you're chambered in the standard off-the-shelf one that almost everybody gets their hands on, just to say that they have one, you're not going to be hunting a whole lot of deer with that. Ammo's expensive. Get something that'll take it down in one shot. Alright, and with that, we're going to head out of here. I'm not even going to bother turning the other music back on, because we're done and we're going over to the Porch Boys. So, thanks everybody who came by and chatted live in the live chat. Everybody who came by and hung out with us today. Looks like there were quite a few of you guys, and even some of you were lurking. So, the lurkers, we love the lurkers too, but remember, we can't get your name into the notebook unless you chat in the live chat. So, if you're just lurking, get a comment in and say hi to everybody or good night to everybody. We'll be back here tomorrow with more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. Looking forward to seeing you guys here for that. It's always a great time in your evening news. I'm going to go get something to eat, but I'll be listening to the Porch Boys in the headphones while I'm doing that. So hope to see you guys in the chat over there. Check the Discord for more on that. Otherwise, if you're on the Twitch side, stick around. We're going to go raid somebody over there to keep the channel going and keep everything going and support great creators over on that side as well. If the Porch Boys had a Twitch, we would be going over there to them on the Twitch side. But with that, take care. Have a good night, everybody. We will see you tomorrow for your news, your headlines, probably more talk about the debt ceiling, because it will only be a day away at that point. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.